What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode 73 of the Spittin Hoops podcast, your weekly NBA show, all things NBA, deep analysis from just two guys who watch a lot of NBA. There's a lot of stuff happening in the NBA world right now. Tons to discuss. Obviously, we're seeing the ramifications of moves that have happened at the trade deadline. We had the All-Star weekend, which was lit. But Anthony and I are going to focus this pod on something else, which is obviously revealed in the title of today's podcast. We're going to be breaking down our NBA all-time 1 to 51 list. This is a list that kind of I drafted up. Anthony's going to critique, and hopefully we'll come to a conclusion of our tier list of ranked number 1 to 51 players. We're also going to be trying to rank them individually, but as we'll get into with the tier list, we're going to tier it mostly. But I'm really excited for that. Anthony, what are you excited for right now? A lot of things in the NBA.
Man, I can't wait. I wanted to share, so started with the fun fact of episode 72. So episode 73, fun
Oh,
fact.
yes.
Let's get a little historical here. So 73 points has been scored twice in NBA history, most recently by Luka Doncic last year. But before that, it had been long held by a man known as the Skywalker, David Thompson.
Mhm.
Had a great career for those who don't know, very early on before, especially in the ABA. He was an unbelievable player and wanted to tell you guys a little bit about his. This is actually a pretty crazy scoring race in 1978. So him and George
Wow.
Gervin were battling off back and forth for the NBA scoring throne. And uh, who was, I'm not sure who David Thompson's coach was. Um, but see where I can find it. Yes. So David Thompson, he was locked in. Only 14 points that separated them going into that last game. And his coach said, "Do you want to go for the scoring title?" And he started going off. David Thompson ended up scoring 32 points in the first quarter, which at that point was an NBA scoring record. And this is, by the way, without a 3-point line. So you got to wonder what would have happened if there was a 3-point line here. Ended up setting then the second highest at the time record. And for a guard, 6'4", unbelievable feat, 73 points. George Gervin would have needed 59 points that same night to surpass him. And he ended up scoring 63. So even though David Thompson had the 73-point scoring night to try to push himself into the scoring champion, George Gervin ended up outscoring that total feat. So pretty crazy 73-point game, especially back in the 70s. I guess it was a pretty high scoring time. Weird also side note, both David Thompson and George Gervin, despite their high scoring games, ended up losing those games. So, but there you have it. There's a little historical fun fact about the number 73 in the NBA.
Fantastic. And both David Thompson, David Thompson on the short list for today's 1 to 51 list obviously did not make it, but
Yeah,
George Gervin will be making an appearance. So we'll get to his career more in that section, right? But great
yes,
fun
sir.
fact. Let's jump into like the right now of today's NBA. This is going to be pretty short, honestly. Like this is going to be just us riffing. Honestly, I just wanted to give a shout out. Obviously, the Lakers look really good. They've been on pretty hot streak since this Luka trade, but Luka's been playing pretty poorly in terms of like shooting percentages, and you can just see the like I just have so much respect for what JJ Redick's doing in terms of these small ball lineups and really like getting this team to lock in defensively. Um, I'm not there yet. I'm calling them a contender, but like they're on their way. They're on their way. Luka just can't play like this, right? In terms of shooting percentages, and then I can't bet on them in the playoffs if Luka's shooting like this, but he's gonna get back to doing Luka things. And if all the rest of the stuff stays the same, they're going to be a very dangerous team, man. I mean, in a lot of these series, they're going to have two of the best two. Like they're going to have LeBron and Luka in the same playoff
Yeah,
series, right? Um, but they look
crazy.
great.
Yeah, they look great. LeBron has continued to take it up to another level. He is zero point 0.1 points away from his streak of 25 points per game in a season continuing. So he's up to 24.9. Uh, Ageless wonder. The weird thing is they still obviously don't have a great big man, although Jackson Hayes has played quite serviceably in this time. Um, but they do have a wide range of tall guys. I think their average height is pretty tall if you include Reeves, Luca, Rui.
They have
DFS
a
was
lot of
what, six
they have
five?
like a sizable lineup. And they're
Yes.
able to switch so much because of that. I mean, we saw that in the Jokic game where they're just basically everyone's switching. They're on a string. It's very
Hmm.
impressive.
That was it. They needed that win. They
Yeah.
needed to go out and not only win, but win handily with a few Denver runs. Those classic, they're up by 12. And how many times have we seen this over the last couple of years where up by 12 against Denver for the Lakers is not a good thing to be. So yeah, very impressive. I'm looking at the standings right now, and let's assume that if the Grizzlies and Rockets stay in the 4 or 5 slot, this 2, 3, 6, 7 side of the bracket in the West could be scary if the Warriors are in there as well at either the 7 or if they hop up to the 6 seed.
I mean, we might get some like crazy like Lakers Warriors round two, and then the Nuggets and Thunder round two on the other side. Like pretty nasty Western Conference. Like, and then both of the
Yeah,
all those teams are going through some really tough series to even get there. You know,
right.
like a Rockets. I mean, Rockets Warriors round one is they're gonna fight. Like Draymond's gonna get suspended, and if that's the 2-7. Like Tari Eason is definitely getting thrown out of like multiple games. He hates the Warriors. But like that's like for example, or like the Lakers. Yeah, I mean the thing is the Lakers have so many wins already. If they go on a streak here, they could get one of the higher seeds, and I don't know,
They're at the
put
3 seed
themselves in
right
a great
now.
spot. Yeah, I know, but they could reach it too. I
They
mean,
could.
The Nuggets are obviously like 2 games up, but they also have played 2 more games.
Right.
Like I don't know.
It'll be exciting. This
If you
is a
get
fun.
if you're the Warriors, I mean, a Lakers Warriors round one is pretty elite too. I'm not gonna lie. Like, not if you're the Warriors, if you're
Oh
an
yeah.
NBA fan. Sorry.
Oh, absolutely.
But
Yeah. Well, it feels great because it's sort of early part of the season. Both these teams were hovering in the play-in spots. And it was like, oh man, is this it for both of them? And then they both got completely revitalized.
I thought so now, like, sorry, pivoting a little bit to the Warriors. I've
Yeah.
already brought them up so many times. My bad, y'all. Honestly, I thought it was going to take them longer to catch the 6 seed. I mean, last night they lose a game that if they had won, they would have started. They would have been the 6 seed. But I mean, they were. This is a team that was like the 10th seed a month ago, right? So it's like they're really climbing themselves out of that situation. It also goes to show how tight the West is in that like
Mhm.
stretch of the standings, right? But like feels like the Warriors are pretty distinctly playing the best out of that group of like the Clippers, Warriors, Kings, T Wolves, Mavericks.
Mhm.
And obviously the Mavericks, for example, dealing with injuries, but like so. Um, so the other question would be like if the Warriors can get the 6 seed, I don't know, maybe I'm looking too far ahead, but if the Warriors go 12-8 the rest of the way, the Rockets or Grizzlies, if they go like 7-13 the rest of the way, now they're dropping. They might be dropping to the 6 seed. So that's also like something that's a little bit on my radar, just given the way the Grizzlies and Rockets are basically sub 500 teams over the last 5 10 games. Sorry.
Mhm.
Um, I think it probably won't happen. I think the Warriors will probably be the 6 seed, but like that's just on my radar. And I think the Lakers have a really good shot to get the 2nd seed.
Well, yeah, to your point, it's interesting. So Thunder are that's done. You
Yeah,
know, we're
Thunder
not we're not
set
gonna they're the one. But then 2 through 5,
tier
to your
two.
point, Nuggets, Lakers, Grizzlies, Rockets, they are 2 games within each other from the 2 to the 5 seed. And then there's that big gap of about 4.5, 5 games.
And then you get the
Clippers,
Clippers,
Warriors,
Warriors.
Kings, Timberwolves, Mavericks, who are still waiting for AD and Gafford to come back. Um, and that's the 6 through 10. So to your point, like maybe a hop could happen from that tier 3 to tier 2. But statistically, that does seem rather unlikely. And to your point, like Memphis or Houston need to play really, really badly.
Yeah. Like, but
Worse than
but
that.
like I know it's like 5 games difference, but in theory, like Memphis going 7-13 down the stretch would not be out of the question. Like I'd be surprised, but it wouldn't be like impossible, you know.
Right.
So I am just flagging that.
Mhm.
I do think there's a good shot the Lakers get the two. I
That'd be
If I'm
nuts.
the Lakers, I don't care about the top 4 seeds, low key. Like it would be nice to get like the thing is like if it comes down to the end of the season, I'm fighting for like the 3rd seed. Like if the Nuggets end up like taking the 2nd seed like pretty
Mhm.
severely. If I'm the Lakers, I'm not trying that hard to get the 3rd seed versus the 4th seed, I think.
Can I be honest? If I'm the
Yeah,
Lakers, I don't mind being in the 4 or 5 spot.
I don't mind either.
I think
Play
I'd
the
rather
Thunder
face
round
the
two.
Thunder round two instead of the Nuggets or the Warriors round two, I'd definitely rather play the Thunder.
Yeah, I honestly like not to be a homer, but I would just not want to play this Warriors team. It's like a very big like question mark. Like it's like one of those where like I think the Thunder, you know what you're dealing with. They're really good, right? But like
Yeah.
offensively, so when it comes down to like second options and whatnot, it's like well, they have a little bit of like a hard time. And then you're just like taking Luca and LeBron and just hoping you can score like 80 points, create 80 points with those two guys and then get 20 more
Hmm.
points elsewhere.
Yeah. With Reeves, with Rui, and then you get a couple of shooters off the bench.
Mm.
Um,
So like if you're the Lakers, like because the thing is like again, not to be a homer, but like this Jimmy Butler Steph situation, I mean they're good, but like you just don't know. Like they could be like they have the best defensive efficiency in the NBA since the Jimmy trade, you know?
yeah.
And like if that held up, like that's just not you just don't want to have to deal with that because there's
Yeah.
no track record here. There's no tape. You don't have enough film to go off of, you know.
The Lakers also have, don't they also have a top three defense in the NBA over the last month or something like that too?
Yeah, they do. I think
So,
I think JJ Redick deserves so much credit because also this is the thing. The Warriors have played a little bit of like a cupcake schedule. Like let's be real,
mm,
since the Jimmy trade, like Lakers have Lakers played some good teams.
yeah, they have. Even before the AD trade, beat the Celtics, beat the Knicks. Uh, yeah, it's exciting. Anything else in the West that you're looking at?
Um, just I can't believe the Trailblazers are catching the Suns.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I took
That's
the over by the way on our preseason on the Blazers, so I feel kind of happy about that.
you
But
might
man,
have, yeah.
the Suns are like I can't believe this. All these reports, like the Devin Booker is like they told Devin Booker he's speaking up too much in the huddles.
Yeah.
Hey
It's
Devin, dude, Golden State, we got a shooting guard slot
easy.
ready for you. We got a shooting.
Easy. Nah, man,
I,
we love Steph because he's a one team man. We gotta love Devin Booker for the same thing. I want him
yeah,
to
I
stay
hope.
with
I
the
mean,
Suns.
I hope he stays with the Suns, man. But they're making it like he clearly wants to stay with the Suns too. But they're making it tough for him.
Yeah,
Um,
no, for real. This
I'm
is
very curious to see what happens here.
um, this is gonna be fun, and this is maybe I'm hopping to a historical kind of thought, but I love that there's a lot of teams with. Well, the trade deadline just switched some of this up, but before the trade deadline, you had Luca with the Mavs for his whole career. Unfortunately, that's done. So we got to say shout out to Dwight Powell being the guy holding it down there. But Steph and Draymond with the Warriors, Devin Booker with the Suns. I mean, Shaw's been with the Grizzlies now for this is his sixth year. Jokic and Murray have been with the Nuggets their whole careers. Tatum, Brown
Shay,
have been with their whole
Shay. I forgot Shay would play for the
Shea,
Clippers. I
Shea.
forgot
But
he
I
played
mean,
for.
maybe you could think about that like he's kind of homegrown because of what that was his second year when he played with the Thunder.
Yeah, close enough.
Um,
Yeah,
Close enough. So just kind of cool to see Giannis obviously continuing to be there. So just kind of cool to see teams like
Jalen
kind of
Green.
sticking with the
Nah,
players. Jalen Green, Alfred Şengün.
no, but
Yeah, just start saying rookies.
yeah.
Um, but it's kind of cool.
No, I agree.
But yeah, it's yeah, Phoenix is chalked, dude, unfortunately.
Yeah, they're shocked. Can I say another team was shocked? I
Yeah,
don't know what happened, but Orlando,
bro,
Orlando like gets players back from injury, and then like they play better.
for real.
And they play worse. Sorry. Uh,
Yeah,
Also like Jalen Suggs like being out and like
yeah.
injured and like 50% half the season. I didn't realize how big of an influence is going to play, but like I really can't
Hmm.
believe they have a losing record. I can't believe they're like 5 games back from the Pistons. By the way, shout out the Pistons.
Oh
Deserve
man.
tons of flowers. 9-1 over the last 10. Oh man. Deserve all
Uh,
the flowers in the world. No Jaden Ivey. No Jaden Ivey.
yeah. So not only are they 9-1, I mean, what I love is when we talked about them a little while back. I'll say shout out when I think they were 9-10 at the time, and I said I had to apologize because I thought they were going to be in the gutter, and now they're 34-27. But some of it's been cupcake, but they had a close loss to the Cavs recently. They did beat the Mavs, and then this winning streak. They end up going in there, beating the Clippers, beating the Celtics. Um, some good wins. If I'm the Celtics, I'd rather not face them in the first round.
Yeah, and it's just another weird team, man. Like power friendship team, and then Cade is just him. I know.
All
I think they're
all NBA.
fantastic. Dude, he might have to be. I'm like thoroughly impressed by him.
Yeah,
I frankly can't believe how good he is. Um, it's not out of the question that they're a top four seed in this
they
East.
could
That's
be.
absurd.
They,
That's really
they
absurd. Like
it's incredible.
what? That I yeah, tons of respect. I mean, they could win a first round series. If you get a Pistons Pacers first round series, you can win that. Against the Bucks, it's a little tough. Like Jalen Duren's getting eaten up by Giannis, right? But like,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, but no, it's nuts, bro. I had one other thing.
Mhm.
You know the 40-20 rule, the Phil Jackson 40-20 rule.
What's the Phil Jackson first ring?
Oh wow. I'm shocked. So Phil Jackson once proposed a simple but like powerful rule to identify elite championship contenders. If a team reaches 40 wins before losing 20 or 40
Mhm.
wins before losing 20 games, so they need 40 wins in their first 59, they should be considered a legitimate title threat. And somebody on Reddit actually broke down all the championship teams and like where their standings were at in 59 games, and 90% of NBA champions have passed the 40-20 test. So every year you kind of look at what teams have been, and it's been the last few teams. I mean, the Celtics last year, it was the Nuggets the year before, and the year before, the Warriors were might have been an exception, but for the most part, the
I think
40-20 test.
they were really good that first half of
Uh,
the year.
yeah, yeah. So I think even though they were the two seed or the three
Yeah,
seed,
two
they were
seed
the
behind the
two seed,
Suns.
right? So yes. So with that in mind, the Knicks were in the running, the Grizzlies were in the running, and the Nuggets were in the running, but now they're all out. So there are only three teams, according to Phil Jackson's rule, are the Cavs, the Celtics, and the Thunder, who could conceivably win the title this year. At least 90% a track record says that this is what happens.
Funny enough, I mean, this feels like a year where like being an exception is like totally plausible. Just given the
Right.
West, like I will
Hmm.
say in the East, like still like pretty severely that like the Celtics or the Cavs are probably the ones spot, right? Like let's
Right.
be honest about it. But in the West, I mean, I think the Thunder are pretty beatable. And maybe we're also disrespecting the Thunder who've won 50 games and Daryl Morey along the same vein. Daryl Morey once said like if you can win 55 regular season games, you can win a title. Like
Hmm.
it's like when the Raptors were winning 60 games and people are
Yeah.
like they'll never win a chip, but it's like I mean you don't have LeBron, but you can do it in theory if you can win 60 games, right?
In theory.
In theory, which is the same thing as this 40-20 rule. I mean, like I don't think the Cavs are going to win a chip. No disrespect, but yeah.
Well, to your point about sort of like the risers in the playoffs, we can look back and there's been quite a few. I think it was 73% of 40-20 or 73% of finalists also make the 40-20 rule. But to your point, you don't need that one as much. The Mavs last year were a 5 seed. The
Mhm.
Heat the year before were an 8 seed, both
Oh
making
my
the
God, I
finals.
can't believe
So,
it. That's so true. I can't believe they
um,
made it out of the play.
dude, this era of parity has been awesome.
And we're gonna see this playoffs is gonna be crazy too.
It's
Um,
gonna be nice.
Speaking of eras, it might
Oh,
be
yes.
time for us to it might be time for us
Well
to
done.
delve into some NBA history.
Let's do
And
it.
starting now, I'm gonna clap, and I think a tier list or a graphic is gonna pop up now of my top 51 players. I tried to do top 50, but since we're going by tiers, there was a guy that I couldn't cut off or I felt that I couldn't cut off. Um, and yeah, so we got the 51 players. That's all. Uh, this is just my list. Please don't get offended. This is just my opinion. A guy who watches a little bit too much basketball, watches a little bit too many historical games. Um, but I'm also gonna be like, I'm also gonna act cocky about this list. Where I'm gonna be like, I don't think you can argue Elgin Baylor versus Oscar Robertson. Like, I'm sure someone out there probably thinks Elgin Baylor is better than Oscar Robertson. My bad, dude. Um, this is just the opinion of one French guy over here. So, anyways, with all those caveats, Anthony, do you have any caveats or thoughts before we get into this? I did just want to say I'm going off of since 1949, the BAA NBL merger. That's when I'm marking the beginning of this list.
Um, yeah, no thoughts. For those who are curious, this is Max's list, so I'm here to kind of look at it and give my 2 cents. I feel like we tend to kind of have similar styles of thought when it comes to this stuff. And this is more supposed to be kind of insight conversation rather than arguing. Number of times I've argued about like LeBron versus MJ, and it just turns into a shouting match. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe
And
this
like
is like, yeah,
if you have LeBron first, like I can't. We're not flaming you. Like we're
yeah, but go
not.
kick rocks, but we're not going to play.
Like you're wrong, but no, no,
Yeah,
no.
you are.
But yeah, honestly, I think this list, like we've talked, you and I have made lists like off the record like so many times. Like I think this list is pretty heavily based off some of our previous lists. I think we've been,
Yeah,
I've listed that of us that we've created since like 2020, yeah, since like 2020. So like
yeah,
I think we'll have similar lines of thinking. That said, the ranks within tiers at least are gonna get really like difficult. So with
yeah.
no
I
further
mean,
ado.
let's
Oh yeah,
do it.
sorry. Yeah, you
Yeah,
ready?
let's do it.
Um, tier one.
Hmm.
We'll start with we'll go with top down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Tier
yeah,
one.
yeah. Should we?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
let's do it
yeah.
because I think the we can just kind of storm through these first ones. All right, so tier one. Those are my A plus plus guys. There's only two guys in this list. I think the best player in NBA history, if we're gonna say it that way, can only be really two guys in my eyes: Michael Jordan or LeBron James. Personally, I'm gonna give Michael Jordan the edge just due to 6 rings and Defense Player of the Year, which just happens to be an accolade that LeBron doesn't have that he probably should have. Um, that said, these are two goats. These are the no doubters. Um, the legends. LeBron's got the longevity. MJ's got the peak. Whichever way you want to go, I'm not going to flame you. These are the two defining players of NBA history.
Yeah, I feel like we've gone back and forth on this. If there's going to be some arguments that are pro LeBron James, it's probably going to be that, to your point, take the Defensive Player of the Year in 2013, which he thinks he should have won, and Marc Gasol did win it, but he was second team All Defense that year, and
And I agree. I think you should have won.
he probably should have
But
won. And he was on fewer All Defensive teams, far fewer scoring titles. MJ has 10, LeBron has one. But scoring titles can be kind of tricky because some years players have fewer points per game. You can win with 28 one year, and then you can not win it with 33 in the next year. So that really does depend. But one of the big things I think for LeBron is that for a good 15 years, he was just universally regarded as the best, if not competing for the best player in the NBA, all the way up until 2020, I think, starting from 2007 or something like that. So 13 years, sure, like a ridiculously long streak. Um, I think one of the big things that would have put LeBron above this is it feels like these days, like Cleveland and with the Lakers, his cerebral game and his fear of failure has dissipated so much in comparison to what it used to be, specifically that 2011 series. And so if he had had that sort of veteran presence and being able to rise above sort of his own mental limitations, I don't think this would be quite as much of an argument. Also, there was never a team that Michael Jordan faced in the finals that was nearly as good as your Golden State Warriors. We could even say that
yeah,
2007 and 2014 Spurs were on par with some of those other teams that Michael Jordan faced. And LeBron did have significantly worse teams that he was in the finals with.
yeah.
So,
I think that's a totally fair analysis. I mean, NBA Finals appearances in 3 different decades. I mean, I think
yeah,
truly, if you had one more chip and one more Finals MVP, I mean, like giving them five would be
yeah,
pretty difficult. And I know MJ has six, but with five and the body of work, it would make it really difficult for me to put MJ ahead of LeBron. But the 2 ring difference, two Finals MVP difference, just sets it apart for me. Even though
yeah.
I think if we take the totality of the rest, like MJ has some accolades that LeBron doesn't have. LeBron has more finals appearances and some more longevities,
Mm-hmm.
more career stats. When MJ clearly has more better peak, frankly, with the
Yeah.
scoring titles and whatnot, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I think all that stuff kind of equals out. And with that, I'm going to give MJ the edge because of the 2 rings. And I think that's kind of the way I see it. I
Yeah.
don't feel strongly about this at all.
Got to give it the edge. I just can't stand the people that say it's Michael Jordan and then LeBron James is like number 7 all time or something like that, where like at this point, you're just kind of being ludicrous. Maybe there's some other arguments in there for a second player if you want one, but LeBron can't be lower than like 3 or 4, and I don't even like that argument to be honest.
I
Um,
can't. I frankly like if you're from a different era and you got Kareem first or something, like so
sure,
be it.
Bill
So
Russell,
be it.
sure,
But like that's still a little tough for me. Still a little tough.
yeah,
And speaking of
yeah.
those guys, they are in my tier two.
Mm,
So three, four, five, six in order that I have is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Bill Russell, Larry Bird. To me, these are era-defining players. They each have multiple rings, multiple MVPs, multiple rings as the best player. They basically just have zero holes in their resume, even when adjusting for era, across the board. Um, Long stretches considered as the best player in the NBA.
yeah,
And in all cases, I think here I'm going to give Kareem the slight edge because I think he was considered the original GOAT. I think there's a pretty good argument to say that Magic might be better than Kareem. But I also think, on the other hand, like Bill Russell also has an argument for that third slot too. Um, I don't feel strongly about any of these. I think Larry Bird does enter this group versus the tier under just because his peak is so good. I mean, his peak
yeah.
is just so absurd.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, this is I wouldn't put Larry Bird higher than six necessarily, frankly, but outside of that, I think all these guys are pretty interchangeable and are amazing era defining players.
Totally. On the Larry Bird piece, you got to wonder what would have happened if he hadn't gotten hurt as much, but that was just his play style. What if Len Bias survives and is able to kind of help elongate Larry Bird's career? But man, this dude was crazy. All first team All NBA his first 8 seasons. Never had a season scoring 30 points per game, but still an unbelievable scorer, rebounder, passer, all defense, and in the Eastern Conference, the East was deep in the 80s. Like you had the Bucks, you did have the Bulls later on, you had the Pistons, you had a couple Knicks seasons in there. It was really hard to come out of the the 76ers. It was tough to come out of the Eastern Conference. And not that the West was significantly weaker. So I think that's where you see the 5 to 3 championship ring disparity between Magic and Larry Bird. Um, I think that it's great that they're in the same tier. Um, no, this is weird. I don't know if this makes sense, but to me, I also have MJ, LeBron, Kareem, and Bill Russell in their own kind of tangential tier because I think those are the four goats based on who you ask in their eras that I think you can make the arguments for. Maybe other people want to throw Wilt Chamberlain in there for the 60s goat. Um, but I do think like that's its own like era right there. Like that's a Mount Rushmore for me.
I agree. So I think that's totally fair, and I think that's true. Those are the four goats of the NBA.
Right.
I do think that Magic is ahead of Bill on my all time still. I think the five chips is still in that era is still a little bit more meaningful than the amount of chips Bill won in his era. I know we're picking hairs at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just I do agree. Like Magic Johnson would not be on that like the
Right.
goats of the NBA, you know. Um,
Right.
and just like the what if that you brought up with Larry Bird, I mean, Magic Johnson's got a pretty big what if in itself, right?
Right.
If he does get sick, right? So, um, but that's just how I feel. Would you put Bill Russell at Magic?
I'd be fine with it. I mean, for those specific reasons, they both had unbelievably stacked teams. They were polar, besides the fact that neither of them could shoot really well. They were polar opposite players, right? Like Magic Johnson is all flash, all offense, run the floor, unbelievable passing. Both amazing leaders. Bill Russell kind of said he was sort of like the anti Allen Iverson, where he was like, I'm going to hold down everything on defense, and you guys just score. And he averaged 14 points per game for his career. So it's not like he didn't, he couldn't score anything. So I think the fact that he's this high on the list too, despite his scoring limitations, it would have been amazing to see if they calculated blocks and steals back in the day because this dude
Oh
would have
man,
he'd be high up on
he'd be
the
at 6 blocks a game.
he'd be at 6 blocks a game, and he might be at 10 blocks a game some seasons. Him and Wilt Chamberlain. I mean, they'd be up there on the triple double list of all time as well.
Yeah,
Um,
that's actually a great point. They would have so many triple doubles.
so
So
many triple doubles.
so you put Bill above Magic for sure? I'm just trying to get your critiques too. I'm trying to go.
Yeah. only because if it's an Eras thing, then I would like I'd put him on the Mount Rushmore, even if Magic Johnson's below. But also, I don't think we need to discount the fact that Magic Johnson could be considered a GOAT for some people. Like the way that he kind of carried, like when Kareem was in LA by himself, shit was not going
Yeah, I
well.
totally agree. That's something I give
Like
Magic a lot of credit for, frankly.
right. Now, granted, Magic had a completely stacked team, but all these guys had stacked teams, so um, it's kind of hard to say. There's a couple holes in Magic Johnson's like career. I think you have like
Mm.
the tragic Johnson
Yeah, 100%.
situation in '84. You let a very
Curveball.
young Hakeem Olajuwon make it to the finals twice, and then an older Hakeem in '86. But still, yeah, I think.
Doesn't get
But
beat early on in 90 or 91 or 92. Gets beat early on by like a Suns or a Supersonics team. Get maybe get
oh
this one wrong.
yes,
He gets
right,
upset
because
by the
the
Dennis Johnson team, maybe.
I don't know. I don't think it was Dennis Johnson. It was the '90s because that would have been what the 1990 season was the year that the Trailblazers made the finals like, and lost to the Pistons.
Jack Sigma.
To Jack Sick.
No.
No, that was a decade earlier. That was Sigma was
Okay.
like Supersonics in '79.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Um,
I'm gonna try to find that. I got knocked up.
but this is nitpicking for me. I mean,
Yeah.
and this is this is my issue with people that have these opinions that are way too close to the chest. Like I think
Oh,
any of yeah,
He loses in the second round in 1990 to the Suns.
there it is. Yeah,
This is
Tom Chambers.
Kevin Johnson and Tom Chambers.
Yeah, that's right.
Not Jack
That's
Sigma, Dennis Johnson. That's kind
yeah.
of honestly pretty interesting.
Yeah, Kevin Johnson, Dennis Johnson, Tom
That's Sigma
Chambers,
and
Jack
Chambers.
Sigma, different white guy.
Yeah,
Um, that's
that's
awesome.
pretty funny.
Any other things? Hmm, I mean, maybe we'll talk about the next tier in a second. I think that this is where it gets tricky because, like, could you throw some guys in like this next tier up and vice versa? Maybe, maybe not. But I really like these four guys. One, three, four, five, six. Yeah, I really like these four guys in this tier.
I
I
agree.
think they're like soundly in here.
Frankly, I agree. And I think they're era defining. And I think they have zero holes in their resume, which is what separates them from this tier three of this. This is the 7 through 11
Mhm.
for me. Uh, by the way, this is like the upper echelon. This is the end of like the top, this top 11. Like, this is the highest echelon of players. Like, yeah, like I can't, like, they just, these guys deserve all the flowers. Frankly, all these guys deserve all the flowers, but like, this is like the legendary players like of the NBA, and they have these 7 through 11 groups specifically. They're air defining players, but they have small holes in the resume, which I'll get to. So here I have Dunk in order: Duncan, Curry, Wilt, Shaq, Kobe. Um, so I know, yeah. Okay, so so it's a very, I feel that, I don't know, it's like very tough to discern all these individuals. And this is actually this section is the one I spent the most time on making this list. Curry only has one finals MVP. Kobe had Shaq for three of his five rings. Shaq had a really short peak. Wilt had really significant playoff struggles and only has two rings compared to the rest of this group during a very shallow NBA, just in terms of numbers of teams. So eventually, I just fell on Duncan having the most well-rounded resume, whether that's like one of the highest peaks of this group, whether that's the longevity, whether that's the rings. Um, I will say, I think Duncan and Steph are above Shaq and Kobe to me. But Wilt is impossible to rank. You could tell me he's 11th. You could tell me he's 7th. I'm good with any of those ranks. I still think Wilt with only two rings though, and that little amount of teams in the NBA, it really makes it difficult for me to put him on like a Larry Bird level.
Okay, where to start here? I'd say my first. This is where my first critique would probably come in. Is I think there's an argument for Tim Duncan to be in tier two, mostly because I noticed that you actually didn't bring up a hole in Tim Duncan's career. You brought up one for the rest of those, but you didn't say one for Timmy. And maybe you got one,
Yeah,
but I just hear
no,
it.
that's my thing is that That's why I have him seventh. Compared to these
Right.
guys, he has the most well. The thing is, his peak is just that's just my struggle. His peak is not on the level of the tier two guys, in my opinion.
So he comes into the league super on fire. He's one of the youngest players to win Finals MVP. He's Finals MVP three times. He's NBA MVP twice. He beats Kobe and Shaq a bunch of times. They beat him a bunch of times. Um, he's well, I guess besides actually, well, Larry Bird never went back to back, but um, he doesn't go back to back, which almost every other guy here besides Wilt does go back to back. But he, much like LeBron, he's won a championship in each era, and his game ages really, really well. I mean, even at the age of 38, he was still All NBA, third team, um, All Defensive Team. I think a record 15 times or something insane like that. Never had a season that was under 50 wins besides the 99 lockout season, which he was on pace for 51. I think he won 37 that year. So has never had a season where he was under. So it came in as a winner, left as a winner. I mean, this is one of the forgotten seasons, the 2015-16 season where your Warriors go crazy, win 73. If they didn't do that, we'd be talking about those Spurs that won 67. And yeah, he was definitely super old by then, but he was an impact player through and through. I think he has the best argument perhaps to go into this tier two. So that's my first thought about this. The next one, I think, to your point, Will Chamberlain is very hard to rank. But the one thing
Impossible.
is, he's impossible. But I will say that, you bring up the eras bit, and I do think that, some of the guys that you have in the top 32 here are Bill Russell, Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, John Havlicek, Bob Pettit, Elgin Baylor, Bob Cousy, and Rick Barry. So yes, we could even say Walt Frazier. We could even say Willis Reed, or some other guys. So yes, there's a weakness in terms of like quantity of teams, but in terms of that talent, you have like seven guys there that are in the top 31 that he was still playing against. And yes, he only has two rings, and maybe that's kind of where the conversation gets a little bit tricky. There's a lot of stuff about how he would search stats instead of wins. But it was tough because in that era, nobody beat the Celtics. So um, it makes it hard. I think for him, for Wilt Chamberlain specifically, if you're going to have him higher up, it's because of the statistical dominance that he had, as well as just the way he played. It was you couldn't touch him.
Yeah, I
Um,
think pretty objectively as like the independent player that Wilt Chamberlain was peak wise, probably had the best peak. But career wise of this group, I think Shaq probably had the best peak. Like if that makes any sense. Like
sure.
Wilt the player was by far the best player at his peak out of these five
Yeah.
guys. But like it didn't
And,
translate.
and
It didn't translate in the rings the way that Shaq's peak did.
well, you could argue he had the best peak in the history of the game too. Uh, I think just
You can't get slammed by Bill Russell every year and the best peak.
that's fair. I mean, at least statistically, to your point, statistically.
Yeah, if you want to say like statistical, like individual player peak, like I get it, but I can't say yet.
Yeah.
But so that's my thing with Duncan, for example, if we're going to talk peaks. I just
Mhm.
don't think his peak is on the like I can't put him in the same conversation as Kareem, frankly. Like just due to the level of peak of Magic, Kareem, Bill, and Larry is so high. Like these are
Right.
like clearly the best player in the NBA for multiple years. And Duncan was like on the level of being the best player, but he was never clearly the best player in the NBA, frankly.
So to your point, I think Kareem could have been the best player in the NBA from 70 one when he won his first ring all the way up to probably like 82. He has an
Mhm.
argument for being the best player in the league. I mean, again, that granted that was like a lot during the 70s and stuff like that. Um,
Bird till 88.
Bird till 88, from probably 82 until 88, you could say he was the best player in the league. Like
Yeah.
he had an argument for it. Probably same with Magic Johnson. Maybe until 90, you could say Magic Johnson was considered the best player in the league.
Yeah.
Um, But Tim Duncan, it's a bit shorter, right? I mean, I think that probably starts in '99 where they when they win their first ring and MJ's retired.
Mhm.
2000 is tough because you have the Shaq dominance, but then you get back into 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005. I think Tim
He's
Duncan kind of
probably, yeah.
pops up
And
there.
that's the stretch. That's the stretch
Right.
where he he's the best player, probably.
Right.
Um,
Um,
but frankly, in that peak, he only wins one ring, and that 3 year stretch, or wins two rings.
well, no, 99, 2003, 2005.
But I honestly like I can't say 99
Rings.
was the best player in the league.
You don't think
Like
so?
Shaq. If we're like maybe in that individual year, but if we look at the totality of his surrounding years, like during that like stretch of time, I think Shaq was the best player in the league. And like
In I mean, in the stretch, yeah, 2000 to 2002, he gets it. But
and
Duncan,
and that and that's like the thing. Like don't like here we're negotiating years where like we could say like I feel like that's my issue with like tier two. I could say like this year to this year, this guy was the best player in the league. Like Duncan,
yeah,
I have to negotiate a little bit. And that's why I can't.
yeah,
That's why I'm putting him a year level under.
sure. And with those other guys, it's tougher to negotiate.
Yeah.
Um,
That's just yeah. Anyways, that other things on this group.
yeah,
I think Kobe is really hard to rank too because like
yeah,
it really is personal. If you give him a lot of credit for those first 3 rings, you could rank him 3 to 4 spots higher than this, in my opinion. And if you don't give him that much credit, like then you put like me, frankly, then you put him on 11. Um, but like I think this group is really tight. This is the group I had the hardest time with.
yeah. I mean, I saw one of your arguments was that his repeat was a shallow league. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I mean, you had the Celtics were
Oh, I don't think I was saying Wilt's peak.
his peak.
Wilt
Oh,
won two
yep, yep,
rings
yep.
in the
Oh, yep. I
no,
misread
yeah, I
that.
don't think I don't think it was a shot.
Yeah.
The
Well,
West
this
was
is
stacked actually. The West was
it
disgusting
was
during that
so
time.
good. The Nuggets were great. The Suns were great. The Spurs were great. The Rockets were really good. There were a lot of great teams. And then in the East too, the Magic were scary good with Dwight Howard. The Celtics were good, even though KG got he tore his ACL. And the Cavs were awesome. So this is a tough one.
I think Kobe can go as high as 8. No issue with him going as high as 8.
Mhm.
Once it's I can't really put him ahead of Duncan, and that's
He
why Duncan
does.
leads this group too.
So it's interesting. I mean, he does have this huge fandom that they say, oh, he's right behind MJ, right?
Hey man,
And
for a big respect.
yeah,
I'm not there,
just not.
but
It'd be cool to if we were to do some sort of. I'm sure people have done this. Some mathematical, like, oh, a ring is the best player on the team equals this amount of value. Scoring title equals this amount of value. See if we could, because right now we're going off like vibes.
yeah,
Um, it'd be cool to see like where all these guys would stand out. But
if we did a mathematical value though, I think we get this like top 11. Like these all this group has like multiple rings, multiple
mhm,
MVPs. Um,
yeah,
most have multiple finals MVP. I mean, that's Steph's limitation. If Steph is 4 finals MVPs. We're talking about this list a lot differently. But
so that's
like,
the one. That's the last one I think in this list too, that we haven't touched on.
oh yeah,
Um,
I've got him 8. I think I can give you my rationale. I think he has
yeah,
2 MVPs, and he's 2 MVPs playing during LeBron's peak, which is pretty impressive. Leads the team to the best regular season record. You can also make the argument that he has one of the highest peaks in this group outside of like. I think Wilt and Shaq are clearly like a level above, like in terms of peak, but you can make an argument that Steph's peak is right up there too, with Kobe and Duncan's. He's good for a really long time, 4 rings. He has 2 to 4 rings as the best player. I think he has 2. Frankly,
yeah,
I'll give him credit for 2.
yeah,
Um, uh, but then he also has like in my eyes, it gets a little bit of credit for like changing the game. As much as
mhm.
I don't want to give that too much credit because like
It's
it's not a
it's
quantifiable
important.
thing. It's
I
not
think that's
yeah.
important.
I think it's important too, but it's not a quantifiable thing. But he's top 5 player in the NBA for the last 10 years. And I think I'm also giving him a little bit of credit for the fact that like he is conducive to winning, more so than I think Kobe was conducive to winning throughout his career. Frankly,
Yeah, my biggest probably knock on Steph is outside of Magic Johnson. These are the worst two defensive players in this top 11. um,
100%.
by a lot. But and maybe again, if I'm playing devil's advocate on why Steph could be lower, the first one would be his first ring. Yeah, he faces the Cavs, but no Kyrie, no Kevin Love. And then the middle two rings were kind of, you could pencil in that they were going to win the championship, in my opinion. And I think that's what we discredit Kevin Durant's rings for. Granted, Steph stayed with the team and he attracted Kevin Durant there, but I oftentimes find it interesting that we devalue KD's rings, but we don't devalue the same exact rings for Steph.
Hey man, I think we
Um,
devalue them. I mean, if you consider Steph to be like if someone considers Steph to be the best player on those two rings, like he should be higher than 8. Like if he's the
sure.
best player on four championship teams,
Yeah, yeah. No, I
like
mean,
then he's closer to the Duncan tier than he is to the Wilt tier.
sure.
So that's
Um,
just I think that is a big knock, and I also think 8. This is probably the highest you can rank Steph, given the current
right.
situation. To be fair,
For now. And I think the reason, like the thing that kind of cracked him into this top 10 was, I mean, I unfortunately witnessed this. Probably in my mind, the crowning moment of Steph's career. I
Mm,
watched this live of Game 6 of 2022 finals where it was belt to ass against the relatively heavily favored, albeit younger, Boston Celtics. Um, but I think you could argue that in that series, Steph's the best player, and then like number two, three
4,
are
5.
probably 4, 5 might be Celtics.
Yeah, like
And of course,
the
yeah.
elevation of the surrounding
Um,
talent.
and he that was the series where he really just kind of like put his stamp on the series. Not that he hadn't in other series too, but it felt like
Imposing his
right.
will.
Very iconic game 4 where the Celtics had a chance to go up 3-1 and he scored 43, I think, and said, you guys are not going to take this and we're going to come back and win this thing. And they sure did, much to my chagrin. So I think he's firmly in this tier. There's no arguments with that. If you disagree with that, go talk to a rock or something.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's firmly in the series. That series, frankly, without that series, there's not even an
Then
argument that
it's
he's under the KDs of the world.
it, and that was the thing for a while.
Yeah. And with that, we're gonna get to the
Yes.
gatekeeper of the upper echelon.
Mm,
Hakeem Olajuwon. He's got no resume flaws, but he just doesn't have as many rings, doesn't have as many accolades to get into the other tier. I mean, I think he's clearly under Kobe, Shaq, Wilt, Steph, Duncan, etc. Like, frankly, I think he's like a tier under those guys. He's got 2 rings during a time where MJ was taking time off. But he was an amazing player, and frankly, winning those 2 rings, very difficult rings to win. He won them out of weird seating spots.
mhm.
And teams that changed, right? I mean, he didn't have Drexler in year 1, did have it. He did have him in year 2, if I remember correctly, right?
Yep.
So frankly, like he's firmly here at 12 for me. He's not in the tier above. He's not in the tier under. He's a tier by himself. Basically, you need at least 2 very credible rings and major accolades to pass him.
Yeah.
So like Steph, first ring, last ring, major accolades. Kobe, back to back, the back to back that he won as the best player, major accolades, etc. Like that's what you need to pass Hakeem, and we'll get to the tier under him. But none of the guys in the tier under him have those things, in my opinion.
So yeah, a couple things on this. So 4 finals appearances, 2-2 in those finals. The 2 he lost were against the absolutely loaded Celtics, so kind of hard to knock him. Plus that 81. No, sorry, no. Three finals appearances. He was not on the 81 finals. He was drafted in 1984, and the only guy that you could really say is okay that he was drafted ahead of Michael Jordan. So what a compliment that is, right? You and I we've done our Hakeem Olajuwon, Kevin Durant debate in the past. I've talked to some people that debate Hakeem versus Shaq, and people put Hakeem over Shaq.
I've heard that
Um,
too, 100%.
and part of it is he went head to head against Shaq and absolutely waxed him. The same Shaq team that beat granted Michael Jordan hadn't played to the last like 3-4 weeks of the regular season, but if you lace him up, it counts. It
Yeah.
always counts. So the big thing that's the big question mark, and I've seen YouTube videos about this, and maybe this would be another great conversation for another time, but the 2 years he happened to make the finals were the very 2 years that Michael Jordan did not make those finals. And if he has one win against Michael Jordan, then he's immediately in tier three in my mind.
potentially.
But to your point, whatever, 12-time All Star, all defensive, defensive player of the year, MVP, two-time finals MVP. Clutch City Rockets is like where this came from. Sixth seed championship, I think, is the lowest seed ever still to win a
Yep.
championship. So yeah, did it in a tough '90s era against a couple of really good teams coming out of the East. So
But he just
it's tough.
and comparing him to Shaq, he just like I think that's the biggest argument. If you like, I think it's a little bit harder. I like, for example, I have Shaq above Kobe, but I think Hakeem's best argument to make tier three is comparing him to Shaq. Like
Yeah,
Shaq just four chips and three straight Finals MVPs is just
yeah,
like that. And there's no like there was no asterisks in any of those finals with like MJ being out. And it's like obviously, like you said, you lace them up, but like I think that definitely affects people's view of Hakeem. But even yeah, I mean, even if he had beat MJ in one of those finals, I think he maybe jumps into tier three. But I don't know if I could have put him too much higher. I mean, two rings is really
sure.
like a limitation compared to all these other guys. Like Wilt's the only other guy in this tier three for me with two rings, and like
Hmm.
like we already waxed poetic about his peak, right?
Yeah.
Let's get to tier five. This is the missing something guys. Um,
Okay.
this is 13 through 17 for me. KD, Jerry West, Moses Malone, Oscar Robertson, Nikola Jokic. Um, hello, Nikola Jokic. You were in her top 17 player in NBA history in my eyes. These are the guys who are just missing one thing on the resume to put them into an upper echelon, and for most of them, it's like another ring as the best player. Moses was amazing, only had one ring. Jerry West, amazing, never won a chip as the best player. KD has two chips, but they're frankly mildly tainted. Jokic doesn't have longevity despite the MVPs and also just has one chip. Oscar doesn't have a chip as the best player. They all have just like crazy accolades, crazy amazing careers with MVPs. Most of the all these guys have rings, and they all have long stretches as top 3 to 5 players. But they're missing another ring as the best player to take them to the Hakeem level, and then even that they would need something to go above.
Hmm.
Like if Jokic retired right now, it's this is where I would have to rank him.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think Jokic is going to win at least one more ring, and then that maybe puts him in that tier four. But he's having one of the like just greatest statistical runs dominantly. He's probably been a top. You could argue he's been the best player in the league since 2021, probably, and still going. So he's on year four of that run. Let's see other guys. I think Kevin Durant, man, that's a really tough one as
A
well.
really tough one. He's a
'Cause
really difficult one to rank. I mean, depending on how you feel about his chips, he could fall anywhere in this list. And I wouldn't feel too bad about it.
yeah,
I'm just frankly choosing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he was the
sure.
best player on those
Hmm.
two Warriors chips.
Right. And I think that's where it happens. To your point though, he doesn't win it. He doesn't win a chip before. He doesn't win a chip after. He has plenty of chances to win championships. Had a
And it gets
chance to knock off.
close.
Gets
Just
close. It's one win away from knocking off your Warriors in 2016. In
one win
2014,
away from knocking off the Bucks in that the year
yeah,
they won the
yeah,
chip.
one like literally 1 inch,
Yeah.
honestly. And let's be honest, they probably win the championship that year. I don't see the Nets losing to the Hawks, and I definitely don't see them losing to the Suns that year, especially if Kyrie and Harden come back and they're healthy. Um, and that vaults him up into tier three. Probably he jumps Hakeem. Um,
And I think those little asterisks is I'm just choosing to give him that credit and ranking him
yeah,
at 13. I think you can rate a few of these guys above him in theory. Like I think you can argue Jokic's
yeah.
peak is just better than KD's peak, frankly.
I think what I like about these guys is that you can't talk about the story of the NBA without any of them. Like Kevin Durant is like all-time lethal scorer. Jerry West is the logo. Moses Malone, greatest offensive rebounder of all time. Three MVPs. Oscar Robertson, the Big O, Mr. Triple Double. I think
Robinson
this is
basically,
tough.
yeah,
Well, I think old heads really really love him. I know that he had like it wasn't that he just had one season of a triple double. He had a 5 year stretch where he averaged triple double.
Top five MVP vote getter for his first 8 or 9 years in the NBA,
Yeah, right. So
but not never getting over the hump as
as the best player,
is like a
as a
major fault.
yeah, and it's a Clyde Drexler type of ring, right? Where he hops on a team with a much better center, and that's where he gets his ring. But
And
all
don't get
these
me wrong,
guys, yeah,
he's very good. He's very good in that ring season. But like, Bob Dandridge is almost as good as Oscar Robertson during
right,
that chip season. So,
right. Um,
and it's 32-year-old Oscar Robertson. Like it's no fling, but it's not Cincinnati Robertson dropping triple doubles.
yeah. I need to add a couple guys to this tier. Here's my critique.
Okay.
I'm going to add uh, a guy from tier five, or sorry, tier six, and I'm actually going to add a guy from tier seven.
Do you want me to list off tier six really quick as we
Sure, sure, and then I can add him.
Yeah. So tier six is the 18 to 24. I got Havlicek, Nowitzki, Giannis, Julius Irving, Elgin Baylor, Bob Pettit, Karl Malone. So these are integral parts of NBA history in my eyes. They maybe have a ring or two, or maybe only a small stretch as the league's best player, but overall they did enough winning, or enough winning over the course of their careers to push them up ahead of other guys who've won chips as the best player. Example, like these guys are ahead of guys like Wade, Kawhi, Isaiah Thomas.
Mhm. Um, So first off, love the John Havlicek shout out. 8 rings, no MVPs, but what was it like 3 finals MVPs or
Yeah,
two? Um,
one or two, I think.
and it's kind of interesting because he, in a Kawhi type way, started as like a bench player for a bunch of these rings, and then won a couple of them as like the key guy in the '70s, with like the Dave Cowens and like JoJo White crew. Um, so I like him a lot, but and like sort of almost a triple double machine threat in his own right. I think Dirk is good in here. Love Giannis in here, of course. The defensive player of the year, the 2 MVPs, the Finals MVP, the iconic Game 6. The Elgin Baylor, I think this is the highest rated ringless player in my mind, for
Mhm.
sure. I'm with you on
100%.
that. The
I don't.
statistical dominance. What's
He
up?
can't go into. I don't know if he can go in the tier higher, but
So, well, I haven't said the tier higher guy yet.
yeah.
Bob Pettit, that's a weird guy. He did beat Bill Russell. He has 2 MVPs, I believe, and 1 Finals MVP. So, I think historically that goes up. Maybe you could argue he's in that tier seven, but I don't have a problem with here. And then Karl Malone is weird because he has like this huge stretch of statistical dominance, plenty of seasons of 25 points per game. We don't need to talk about the Karl Malone stuff. Outside of it, let's just talk about his resume. But couldn't get over the hump. Um, uh, really, really great old player too. Like one of the best old players in NBA history. I think Julius Irving should be in tier five.
Mm.
Um, that's the guy for me. I get that he only has 1 ring. I get that he wasn't the Finals MVP for that team. I believe was he the Finals MVP for the '83 Sixers, or was that
I
Moses
don't.
Malone? It
It was most.
was Moses Malone, right? So, um, however, that team was unbelievably dominant. They beat everybody in their path on the way to that ring. I think he definitely gets hurt by the fact that he played in the ABA for so long, but the fact that he was so dominant in the ABA, which I think he was a multiple time ABA MVP and champion, and then
Two-time champ,
immediately
three-time MVP
right,
in the
and
NBA.
it's
ABA.
right, right, and it's tough because he. This is an NBA list, right? Because then if we're going to expand into ABA, then we could say, okay, what about like college championships and stuff like that? So I get that there has to be a line somewhere. Um, but I do think, and this is kind of considering that like subjective nature of the influence of the game and why I think Steph with a 3 point revolution does have that element of it. Um, and there's a bit more with like aura stuff. um, and I think Julius Irving paved the way for, I mean, Michael Jordan himself has said how much he was influenced by Julius Irving. I think this is kind of that Oscar Robertson level of aura where, guys who played in that era, they have him in their top 10. Um, and I think that and I might have to go in and look up some of the statistics myself, but I feel like Julius Erving was just such a dog. I think a couple of blemishes, did not beat Bill Walton when he had a chance when he first got into the NBA. So maybe he was a little bit older. But that's a guy I'd consider having up in that tier five. But again, with the small stretch issue of too much ABA.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I mean, we're robbed of his year 20 to 25 season because of the ABA.
Yeah,
If we're
right.
if we're like just talking accolades. So I think that's
In a
totally fair.
in a weak NBA. Like imagine if he had been in the NBA in the 70s. Oh
I
my
think
goodness.
changes a lot, frankly.
Yeah.
A lot of Celtics, a lot of Celtics chips are happy right now. Is that like the Cowens years and the JoJo White years, right?
Right. Um,
Um, so yeah, I think it's totally fair. Who's the guy? I mean, do you want to get to I can list off tier
yeah,
seven. You can tell me who
sure.
you'd rank up.
Well, so I will say I'll probably I personally so I bring up Julius Erving into tier five if that's me.
Mhm.
I'd probably take out Bob Pettit and Karl Malone from tier six. Um, but never fear because replacements are here. But I'll have you list off tier seven.
Tier seven, I have Kawhi, Kevin Garnett, Charles Barkley, Isaiah Thomas, Bob Cousy, Dwayne Wade, Scottie Pippen. So each of these guys has like a ring or two or a peak that's like top three of the NBA for like a solid amount of time. I think Kawhi is the best synthesis of the two, where like he's probably considered the best player in the 2021 season, or the 2019 season, where he wins the chip with the Raptors, frankly, and then he has multiple chips. Um, but I'm giving also a good amount of credit here to Bob Cousy and Barkley for their longevity, and they frankly probably have higher peaks than like Pippen, for example, who has 6 rings. But I think these guys are all a little bit more vital and to multiple rings or multiple situations in NBA history than like the Rick Barrys and Bill Waltons of the world,
Mm,
or in the tier under, for example, just previewing them. Or like George
yeah,
Mikan is my next tier. Like I think these guys like are just still like
right.
above like those guys, even though those guys have chips or like MVPs. Um, so
Um, yeah, I think this is a solid tier. Kawhi, one of the most interesting careers, right? I might have him a bit lower because here's the thing. One of the key things is if you're in this top seven, in these top seven tiers, one of the conditions is you would need to have been at least the best player or consider the best player in the league. For me, he gets that with his 2019 Toronto run. I think there's no doubt. And his late Spurs years too, he was incredible. Um, Even with the Clippers, he was great, but no Clippers playoff history um, to speak of. And the Spurs Finals MVP, yeah, he got it. That was one of the weaker Finals MVPs, in my opinion.
yeah, 100%.
I don't know if it's like an Andre Iguodala level, Finals MVP, but it's definitely like a Jaylen Brown Finals MVP, right?
Yeah,
Where it doesn't
that's a
hold that
good
same weight. And then
that's
the
a good
fact
comp.
that right, and then the fact that now he gets the second one with the Raptors, it almost like back relevates and like elevates
Yeah.
that 2014 Finals MVP. So that's one. I mean, it's nitpicking. I probably put Kevin Garnett into tier six here,
Mm.
because of the peak where he was not only scoring and rebounding, but defensive player of the year. Well, actually, that was later on in his career, but defensive, all defensive, um, on the same par talent wise as Tim Duncan. Unbelievably weak in poor management, kind of like a LeBron James Cavs situation with the Timberwolves, and we can talk about their ownership problems ad nauseum. Um, but then gets to the Celtics immediately as defensive player of the year. And for me, I just think that he should be in that tier six. I think that he's much closer to a Dirk Nowitzki. I think I see those two power forwards as sort of the opposite sides of a similar coin, where Dirk has his own individual run where he pulls it together. But Dirk does have plenty of seasons with Steve Nash, with Michael Finley, with talented teams where he flames out. And for the longest time, he is known as this choker until he gets the one ring, granted an all-time ring against going for a three-peat Lakers, against the Young Thunder, and then against, of course, the Heat.
I think that so personally, if I can push
Yeah,
back, I think
sure,
that's what puts Dirk a tier above
sure,
Garnett for me. It's that run.
sure.
And I think Kawhi, as much as Garnett has a better career in theory, Kawhi having that run. So like the thing is like Garnett's got an MVP, Kawhi's got a better, more defensive player of the years. I would argue
Hmm.
Kawhi's got a season where he's the best player in the league. Garnett doesn't. I think a lot of that stuff ends up canceling out. And like, sure, Garnett has like more defensive teams than all NBAs, but like Kawhi does like straight up have like another like frankly all time run. Slamming teams that are worse. That frankly I think the Raptors were not the best team in the league that year, and he's taking out some absolute titans. That's just
Right.
why I have Kawhi above Garnett. Um, I think Garnett having 6 straight first round exits, and I know he was on the T Wolves, and I know that was poorly managed, but like that's really rough. Like 6 straight first round exits is like kind of
It
tough.
it is really rough, but I think that's like where I see with Kawhi outside of that Raptors run, and I get it to your point, like this is where he has this sort of like bright moment. What else does he really have? I mean, again, of course, he has the Spurs. He's 3 finals appearances. He's 2-1 in those finals appearances. And people can argue, well, if KD is there on the Warriors, then they're going to beat the Raptors in 2019, which I agree. But we saw how good the Warriors were without KD, so we can't really discredit him for beating them. Um, I just think it's for me, it's like the MVP, it's the regular season dominance. I think that plenty of these guys have had stretches, even the guys in the tiers above where they have had first round flameouts plenty of times. With Dirk, I don't know Bob Pettit's and Elgin Baylor's or deep playoff runs off the top of my head, but Karl Malone missing the conference finals and the finals a bunch of times. That's kind of it for me, but maybe it's also like my love. Celtics fans love Kevin Garnett too,
Yeah.
so maybe that's kind of popping up for me.
All right.
But I hear that.
I hear you. Is there anyone you drop out of this tier? I mean, if you want, I can go to tier 8.
No, but there is another guy put up. This is my tier 5 guy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you guess who it is?
Kuzi?
No, no.
No idea.
It's
Thomas?
it's Thomas. It's Thomas. For me, Isaiah Thomas is the third best point guard in NBA history.
Ah,
Um,
I think it's totally fair. I
um,
struggled to rank him.
so, and here's why. You have the Larry Bird and Magic Johnson years, and you have the Michael Jordan years. And this 6'2", 6'3" point guard comes in and manages to just etch out a back-to-back championship like window and 3 straight finals. And if not for a phantom foul on Karl Malone, or sorry, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the '89 finals, I think you could argue that he's a 3-time champion. Now we can't do revisionist history, so that does not matter. Um, it is what it is, and we're looking at it for what it is. But at the same time, you look at some of his playoff runs, and he doesn't have the gaudiest numbers, but um, in his 26, 27, 28 year seasons, in his first run where he does lose to the Lakers, averaging 22 a game, 22 and 9. And then he's the Finals MVP 2 years later. And Joe Dumars does get a Finals MVP, so he only has one. But I think that is for me. I think the fact that just the bad boy Pistons, it's this little era that he carves out. He beats out Larry Bird after knocking on that door forever. He holds Michael Jordan at bay from starting his championship runs even earlier. Um, I think he deserves to be in this tier 5. That's just me personally. I think he should hop a lot of these guys. I know that he doesn't have an MVP. I know he only has one Finals MVP. And the guys that you have in tier 5 all have, besides Jerry West, all have an MVP. Um, and they all have a Finals MVP. But that's just me. If not tier 5, at least tier 6. But I think he's a top 20 player of all time, personally.
I think it's fair. I don't have him top 20, but I think this is the lowest you can rank him. How about that? Like, I think
Sure.
I just have an issue. The 5 All NBA is a little tough. Like, we're getting
Yeah.
really shallow in terms of like long-term impact. Um, and I think the Bad Boy Pistons were like really good. Like, he obviously is great, and he was the best player on that team. But like, that was an incredibly good team as well.
Mm.
I Yeah, I think this is the lowest you can have. I would feel comfortable moving him up like on my list where like I couldn't put him above like Julius. I have Julius 21, which is also the lowest. I think you could rank Julius. I don't know if I could put Isaiah Thomas above Julius Irving. So like I don't know if I could put him above 21, but I think I could like if you told me he's better than Karl Malone and Bob Pettit, I think it's totally fair. And so maybe that's where I need to maybe adjust the tier. Like I think
Mhm.
like I personally would struggle having putting Isaiah Thomas above Giannis, Dirk, Havlicek, or
And then maybe he goes up into tier 6 rather. But I that's me. That's where I'm looking at. I just think like I think he's ahead of Charles Barkley. I get that Barkley has an MVP and a Finals appearance, but I think there's too many low seasons for Charles Barkley. Um, Even though he obviously has like that like depth of or length of a great career. Bob Cousy, I also struggle with. I think to your point, I mean, he was like the first like superstar point guard, I guess. And he did have a pretty long career, and he's iconic. I struggle with the older guys. I want to quickly touch on D Wade and Scottie Pippen. D Wade, that 2006 finals run is the reason why he's in this tier. I think there's no doubt. I think all Celtics fans have, or sorry, all Celtics fans wish, but all NBA fans have a bit of a downer on his health. After his first 2 years with LeBron, his health went down really, really quickly. People say that's why he was called the Flash because that's how long his prime was. But before LeBron got there, he had a first round exit, and he had a couple down years with the Heat in between his championship win over the Mavs, and then before LeBron gets there, which I think
T3
was why
MVP
he's
though.
appropriate here.
To be fair, T3 MVP. Gotta give
Yeah,
him a shout out in 2008, 2009. But yeah, I agree.
yeah,
I think
yes, oh yeah,
and it's like one of those where it's like if he had just had that Mavericks ring, like the ring against Mavericks and nothing else, he'd probably be closer to Rick Barry.
yeah,
And like if he didn't have that ring and was basically just known as the second tier guy next to LeBron, he would also be closer to like Rick Barry. But having like both of those things puts him in this
yeah,
tier above the
right,
Rick Barrys, above the Dave Callens.
right,
You know.
right.
Um, I
Uh,
feel pretty solid now that I'm looking back at this. I feel pretty solid about this top 31. I think Pippen deserves to be in here too.
yeah, for sure.
With the like, not only does he have 6 rings, but very good in times where he had to be called on to be the best player, even if though he didn't lead teams as far as like a Wade did, for example.
Mhm.
But he had but I do think 6 rings as the second best player is like it puts you in here. Um,
Uh,
that
yeah,
that probably puts you again. It probably puts you ahead of Bill Walton's like MVP, and then subsequent like 6-man contributions to rings. You know.
I'm totally with you. I think again, this is fully like what you did on the court. So although I might not really love a lot of like what he talks about off the court right now with, his like whatever his ever shifting changes, who the GOAT is. Two other things that add to it on top of his defensive prowess and his on the court, where he was the statistical leader for all the Bulls runs outside of scoring. Um, One was the first year where MJ was out, where he was a top 5 MVP candidate, first team All NBA, and they only lost a couple fewer games. And I think, but his lack of leadership in that season kind of shows where like that drop off is. And then the second one for me is that if the Lakers don't come back in the 2000 season with that 17-point fourth quarter, that's really what kickstarts their season. Him on the Blazers, I mean, he could have been a Finals MVP on the Blazers. He gets his 7th ring, and he is able to say that he got a ring without MJ, and MJ never got a ring without Scotty. Not that that makes Scotty better in any way, but it would elevate
I mean,
his status.
if he gets that, he's in like tier 5, and actually like, um,
Sure,
one of my thoughts is like all of these guys, just like one other chip as the best player or one other Finals MVP puts all these. They all vault like 10 slots. Like if Scottie
sure,
Pippen won a chip with the Blazers, he's probably above like Giannis. You know,
yeah.
as if he got Finals MVP. So
If
like
you go,
that's
if
the
you got
thing.
Finals MVP,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah,
Well,
this is a good list.
yeah, it's my top 31. With that, I'm gonna go pretty quickly to the rest of these. This is all, frankly, we're all picking hairs here, but now
Yeah,
that we're in like the 32 to like 51 range, I'm gonna give you just my next 2 tiers, tier 8, tier 9 off the rip. I think
yeah,
these. are pretty close. I think tier eight. I'll give you tier eight first and I'll give you my thoughts about it.
Yeah.
So 32, I got Rick Barry, 33, Bill Walton, 34, David Robinson, 35, George Mikan, 36, David Cowens, 37, Willis Reed. These are all guys who won chips as the best player or won chips and were significant contributors outside of
Mhm.
that, or were like MVPs, etc. I think they all had a little bit higher peaks than the guys in the tier under them, and then also have like a little bit better accolades and ring contributions, whether that be Bill Walton or whether that be George Mikan. Mikan really struggled to rank him. I think this is probably as high as you can go on him just due to era. In theory, you could rank him higher just because he's got more rings and he's the best player in the league for 5 years, which none of these guys can say. But I think era adjusted, it's probably as high as I can rank him. Um, yeah, that's I have lots of thoughts about this list, but like Willis Reed, Dave Cowens, like multiple title winners, best player on those teams like that. Rick Barry, similar deal. Like this is the tier, by the way, above my tier nine, which I'll list right now. Tier nine is 38 through 45. Chris Paul, Walt Frazier, Steve Nash, James Harden, AI, John Stockton, McHale, Gervin. And I think that Willis Reed, Cowens kind of group has like a chip or like an icing on the cake a little bit more to their career than someone like Chris Paul, or frankly even like Walt Frazier. So as good as Walt Frazier was, um, or Stockton. So
Um, let's see. So my thoughts here real quick. Um, I think that for the Walt Frazier one, did Willis Reed win both of those finals MVPs? Was he two-time final MVP?
I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly.
Was it him or was it like Earl Monroe or somebody that got the other one?
Oh, it might have been.
So that's
Um,
my only thing with Willis Reed.
no, no,
If
Willis
he
Reed
did,
won both.
yeah, he won them both. Okay, so that's him there. Granted, I do think that you could argue that Walt Frazier did have a better final or playoff run in that 73 season than Willis Reed.
Oh,
So that's
and
like
he
now
probably
I'm
should have
just
been. I mean, frankly, he probably should have been finals MVP first. But
yeah,
like, we
right.
can't.
This is right. It is history and stuff, and I think we say the same thing about again like Andre Iguodala, Steph Curry finals, right? Um, Other thoughts here. I think John Stockton should be probably at the top of this list if Walt Frazier isn't bumped up. And that's just because the longevity, he has both the assist and the steals records by a long shot. I think he was a many time all defensive team, ridiculous number of all stars. Um, let's see. 10-time All-Star. How many times was he all defense? Uh, do, 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 do. Oh, I guess he wasn't all defense as much as I wait. What? Oh, I could have sworn he was all defense
He
at
was
some
all
point, but
defense, I don't remember if he was all defense, but he was definitely like weirdly like a top 10 vote getter for Depoy a few times, if I remember.
right.
Um,
Yeah. Right. All defensive.
like kind of a Clay situation where you got Depoy votes a lot, but only
Yes,
made
he
like
got a
one
lot.
defense.
Right. Yeah, one of those things. Just consistent. I think just tons of seasons where he led the league in assists. He has like people say like what's your NBA moment, and one of his is sending, was it the Rockets home on a buzzer beater to win a series. I think that was 97, I believe. um so that's my small thing. I think he should go above AI, even though AI is iconic and James Harden is iconic for their like scoring prowess and leading teams to finals. Not Harden, but AI. But AI's, I think that's where he gets leveled up, right? And AI won in probably the weakest conference of all time.
My
Yeah,
rationale, just to give you my rationale,
yeah, sure.
and I think there's a common thread between like Chris Paul, Frazier, Nash, Harden, Iverson, all in my list being above Stockton. I think all these guys are so close that I kind of ended up giving an edge to the peak. Because I think Stockton does have the lowest peak out of all these guys. As good as he
Sure.
is, he does have, in my opinion, the lowest peak out of Iverson, Harden, Nash, Frazier, Chris Paul.
Hmm.
I do agree with your sentiment that Frazier could be bumped up. I think he's a little tough for me.
Hmm.
But I think Chris Paul deserves a good amount of credit for like just getting unlucky in his career at 70 points. And
Yeah.
Like, like I think this is also as high as you could rate Chris Paul. I will say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think this is also on the other hand probably as low as you can rate Stockton. Um, I just I'm just giving like Iverson's peak just better than Stockton's like solidly. Harden's peak solidly better than Harden, a little bit in Ivory than Stockton. Sorry. Um, Chris Paul's peak, in my
Um,
opinion, is solidly better than Stockton.
yeah, I mean, I think this is fair. A couple shout outs. I made this like list a while back in like 2021. It's like called
Mhm.
Who's the Best? And it's like who's the best player in their year, just according to my own thoughts. And I think on this list, AI and James Harden are the only two players in this tier who you could argue had a chance to be considered the best player in the league. AI in 2001, and then James Harden in his 2018 season. Although I probably still would have said it was LeBron, but I would have heard an argument for James Harden that year. Um, so to your point, I think that that peak brings them up. Um, I do find it interesting that you have one, two, three, four, five, six straight point guards or guards, which is pretty cool. I think you
Yeah.
just got into the guard flow there.
And honestly, like I tried to break the pattern there, but I think like Gervin's also a tough one because I think Gervin could totally be in like you can slot him pretty highly on this list just because his peak is really high, but in terms of playoffs, I mean just not in
That's the
the
thing with Gervin. Yeah, that's the thing.
yeah.
Like Gervin has a great. Um, quick thoughts on McHale. If not for some injury stuff, I think he could have maybe entered like the conversation as like one of the top three power forwards of all time, but he just didn't get there. But great, fantastic six man, one of the best post players of all time.
And his peak is
Uh,
nowhere near any of these other guys,
right,
frankly. Like, but he's way much more of a winner than all these
right,
other guys, and that's why he's
right,
in this tier. And he gets to
right,
be in there. I just was having trouble discerning him between like a Stockton, Iverson, or Harden, for example. Like these are
right.
very different resumes that I think deserve to be talked about in the same breath, but ranking them is tough. Like if you told me you take McHale over Harden, like I can't really flame you.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. Probably can't. I mean, does he win if Larry Bird's not there? I don't think so. But that's the same thing with all these guys. You need other players there. I don't hate this list. George Gervin, that's probably the trickiest one for me. I think that's the easiest one that I would have been okay with dropping down because of his poor playoff situations, especially in the 70s, where the NBA was just wide open. You got to get it done. But twice he was, or three times he was top three MVP option. All NBA one, two, three, four, five, six, seven times. Um, seven straight times too. So yeah, that's a tough one
And
to
then
not
I guess I'll
include.
give you my tier 10, which is our last
Yeah,
tier, which is a
yeah,
comparison. And I just think Gervin is like a level above these guys in terms of
sure.
totality of his career. And that's Sam Jones, Paul Pierce, Russell Westbrook, Gary Payton, Wes Unseld, Patrick Ewing. So
Hmm.
here we actually get some guys with like some really solid peaks. Some guys were best player on championship teams, etc. But I think they're just missing a good amount, like in terms of accolades and in terms of more than one ring, like in both Pierce and Unseld's case.
Yeah,
That even though they have the ring that Harden doesn't, I can't. I think Harden was better at his peak than, or was a better player than Paul Pierce, quite frankly. So that's
yeah,
kind of
for
where I'm
sure.
at. I think Sam Jones is impossible to rank too. You could put him higher than this. You could put him lower than this. Um, like he was very, very good. And won a lot, but this is just
Ten,
like the
10 rings.
Celtics, yeah, Celtics 60s thing. Um,
Hmm.
like I could put Sam Jones. Frankly, I think you could put Sam Jones above Gervin. But those are just so difficult to rank. Um, but frankly, I think Gervin was the better player than Sam Jones, and that's why I've got him a tier above. And I think
Hmm.
Gervin was better than all these guys. Like if you just like took the totality of their careers, I know Russ has got his MVP. I know Unseld's got a chip and an MVP. But that's kind of where I'm at with this. I don't think these guys, this whole group, their careers didn't end up synthesizing as well to make them end up higher than this. Short peaks, you know.
Yeah, either short peaks or you know just success at different levels at different times.
Yeah. And like, you got 10 rings if you're Sam Jones, but you also average 15 points. Like, yeah,
Right. Paul Pierce, you got the one ring. Could have had two. That would have elevated you more, but
oh yeah.
had
I mean,
the
if he has two rings and two finals, like finals MVPs, like he's in a different conversation for sure.
yeah, we don't have to talk about it. But
Yeah.
um, Russell Westbrook, I think, yeah, to your point, like one of the definitely top 10 point guard. That'd be fun if we went down like a top 10. I know we've done our point guard debate before in the past, but it'd be
Mhm.
fun to have like top 10 of each
Straight up.
position debate. I think that'd
Yeah.
be fire. Um, Gary Payton, another great one, right? Like nine-time all defense, brought his team to the finals against MJ. And I think that was probably MJ's toughest series, even though, I mean, they all of them practically won 6 games, but that was the one where he had his worst sort of statistical series. Um, and he was a veteran on a championship team, Gary Payton. So got to
Yeah.
give him that. Wes Unseld, just weird, no offensive bag. Won a chip for the Bullets in that very watered down era. And then Patrick Ewing just couldn't get it done, consistently not clutch at the right times. Got smacked around in the finals the year he made it, and then was injured the year where the Knicks made that magical '99 run.
Yeah.
So, but obviously fantastic, center during the '90s.
I think the
Um,
only guy that I would could drop from tier 9 to tier 10 would be Gervin, but I think Gervin just still like when I think of this the group 10, I think Gervin just first thing that pops into my mind is he's just better than all these guys.
sure.
Like and I know technically Russ is an MVP and Gervin doesn't like that. Um yeah.
Um, yes.
And I know that's like a really vibes take, but I think Gervin was probably better than Paul Pierce. You know,
Yeah,
just going back like just
sure.
yeah,
Yeah, higher peak.
yeah. And
Um,
and if Paul Pierce's longevity was a little bit better, and maybe if he had, been a little bit better, like if there's those Antoine Walker teams were a little bit better, maybe I'd feel a little bit differently. But
mhm. Um, did you have anybody else that you were considering for tier 10?
yes, I think Clyde Drexler is my number one.
Yeah.
Next up, I think Kidd has got a shout, but I think Drexler, I feel pretty
Oh,
strongly about
yeah.
Drexler
Uh,
being the next up. Um, Let me give you my
I
case for it. I actually wrote down my like a pros and cons to Drexler because I was so on the fence. Like,
oh, okay, cool. I actually had a take on Kid, but let's hear the Drexler
okay.
one first.
So like the case for him is like 17 points per game every single year of his 16-year career outside of his rookie year. He gets to Houston outside like the year after they won the chip, right? But Houston was the 6th seed. They end up winning the finals with one of Clyde's better playoff performances in that playoff stretch. Drexler also played it in the West with in the West in the 90s, which in Portland, right? Which is Magic Johnson. You're playing. It's a tough conference. Obviously, East was really good at this time too, but I'm trying to clarify that it wasn't like a easy conference in the West either. Especially on
Sure.
a team, it was what Drexler and Kiki Vandeweghe at first, and then Drexler and Tracy Porter, right? It's like
Terry Porter.
or Terry Porter's, yeah, sorry, Tracy Porter. Yeah, isn't. But yeah, so and like I don't know, like Terry Porter, like well, yeah, I don't know. He was like, but the case against him, right, is that Drexler gets to again Houston the year after they won the chip. Clyde couldn't get it done in Portland. He made a Western Conference Finals and a Finals, but um, Clyde had Kiki Vandeweghe again, 20 points per game between 1984 and 1988. And I know the Lakers were still good during that stretch, but like it's like during none of that time does he really like break out and like is able to like grasp a
Yeah.
championship or like get a long stretch of success. And that's kind of my issue there. Yeah. But also I will say, some people say he took the easy way out asking to get traded from Portland. I think he just wanted to play with Hakeem. Like Portland was ahead of the Rockets when they got traded. And actually that ended up being kind of a masterful stroke out of Drexler. Um so yeah, he's kind of my guy. I have lots of thoughts about Drexler. I think he has a fascinating career.
Yeah, he really does. Top three Blazer of all time, right?
He's just got to
Two
be
time.
right at something for me.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think that's fair. Made it to the finals twice. Something that you can't say about Damian Lillard. And I mean, Bill Walton won a championship, but you can't say that about Bill Walton. Um,
It
well,
is
he
something
did
you could
make it to the
say.
finals twice, but
It is something. Yeah,
with the Celtics.
it is something you could say about Jason Kidd though.
And that's my other thing is I think actually I think Jason Kidd could have been in this like rotunda of point guards that you had, honestly. With if we just look at Jason Kidd's some of his seasons. So yes, he is an NBA champion, albeit towards the end of his career. But he is a one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight time all 9-time All-Star. He was actually an All-Star the year before they won a championship, although it was kind of a weird All-Star where he was like 10 and 9 that year. But still a facilitator on that championship team. If we look at some of the accolades, so Hall of Fame, 10-time All-Star, 5-time assist champ, 6-time All NBA, 9-time All Defensive Team, and then again to your point, back-to-back Finals appearances in the early 2000s, even though they ended up getting smacked around silly
Yeah.
by the
So
Spurs and Lakers.
if the team's performances in the finals, and if the East was better, I would
Yeah,
put Jason Kidd in. But those were pretty weak Easts. I mean, if I remember during it, they only dropped like two games going all the way to the finals. When they
yeah,
played the Spurs, and like then his team was solid, right? And like don't get me wrong. I mean, they were like they had Jason Kidd, like Kenyon Martin, like Richard Jefferson. Like they were pretty good, right? But like
yeah.
no, I think that's kind of my issue with Jason Kidd. Um, and peak wise, I think at his best, right, he had like a top five MVP finish, if I remember correctly. Maybe he had another one.
Yeah,
I think he had a second, maybe second on top
um,
MVP, but I think
he
he had two
was he
top five
was
MVP,
he was yes, two top five, and then there was an MVP second place year
yeah,
with the Nets.
which I think is good, but lack of playoff success, lack of like peak, I think is why I left him out in general. I think he's just like a tier under Gary Payton, maybe. And like Gary Payton was really good. Like, so I don't know. I think it's tough. I see the argument. I just if we talk about watered down leagues, like I think the East, for example, in general, is pretty watered down at this point in time. Like yeah,
Well, right, and that was my Iverson thing too.
which I think is totally valid. But Iverson's MVP, which is a little bit.
Um,
Yeah, well,
and
that's my list. I don't have anything else on this. Honestly, I think we did a lot. I'm gonna have more tiers that I'm gonna be adding to this. That will circle back, and then I'm sure we can go back and compare some of the other slots. But yeah,
um, one other guy that I'd think about is this is just a thought right now, but maybe Embiid. And it's tough because of the injury stuff, the lack of playoff success, never making it out of the second round. But I think he had such a peak where in my mind, you could easily say he was the best player in the NBA for at least one season, or you could argue that he was the best player in the NBA for one season and wouldn't have pushback, I don't think. Um, and I don't know if there are some guys on this list that, you can't really argue were even top three players in the NBA,
which I think
who
is
are ahead of
I
him.
think is super valid. But I want to see Embiid's career end. I need to, like not no, I don't want to see it, but I like in terms of ranking. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
rooting for it, but I just want I kind of need to see more. Um,
Yeah.
but I
Let's
hear the argument. If you want to put him in here, I hear the argument. But he's like in a D Rose air for me.
Sure, sure. Can we look into the future? Who actively, who currently makes this? Who is? Let's not say like young guys. Who is 3 seasons away from realistically uh cracking this top 10 tier list?
I
Three
got
seasons.
Tatum, Luca,
Tatum, Luca, yeah,
Gap, Tatum, Luca, Gap.
Shea,
Bad. Like if you want to chip, I mean, he'd start being in this
if he wants to
combo.
chip. Yeah.
But like, I think those are like two guys for me, who are like one chip off of being.
Hmm. Yeah. Anybody else, or is that it right now?
I think that's kind of it. I mean,
I
like
mean,
the thing is, like a lot of the other guys, like Ant, they'd be too young. Like if Ant wanted to chip,
yeah,
he'd just be too young. The other like SGA is just a little too young. He wouldn't have the body of work. It's like when Giannis first wanted to chip, it was tough to rank him just because he's like, or like, who's a better example?
that's a tough one
Like
because he'd already had the accolades, but like maybe an
when
early Tim
Kawhi won his
Duncan.
first chip, like
Sure,
Kawhi.
sure, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
early Tim Duncan's good.
or like early
Yeah,
D Wade. Yeah.
I think that's all I got, man.
Yeah.
I think this is a long pod.
This is
It's
a
been a
long
lot of
pod.
history.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, this is a great list. This is probably gonna change this year, honestly, because either Jokic or I mean, if SGA, then that's a tough one. But I think he has an argument now cracking this, especially with the top, finishes in the MVPs and potentially, he's the betting favorite to win MVP this year. If Tatum gets a ring and the Finals MVP, then I think he cracks this list now. Um, and if Jokic gets it, he jumps up a lot. If Giannis somehow magically gets it, he jumps up a lot. So this is gonna be exciting. Yeah,
Anything
very good
else?
stuff.
That's all I got for this week, bro.
No, yeah, I think looking forward, we'll probably continue this conversation on what it would mean for each team to win a ring and how this would help all their historical legacies. And I'm excited to kind of like host All Star, maybe do some tiering. It's just a lot of great basketball going on.
Yeah, a lot of contender talk, especially these next few weeks. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, dude. Good stuff.
That's all.
Anything else? Cool. Well, we love y'all, folks. Stay tuned. Keep watching the league. Lots of exciting stuff. Playoff spots are starting to solidify. We'll be chilling here as always, watching the NBA and Spittin Hoops. We'll holler at you soon. Take it easy now.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.